Today's presentation is concerning outdoor game being cooked indoors. This is often a stumbling block to the novice cook cooking outdoor game indoors. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way if the proper cooking method and ingredients are selected. I call today's dish farmer's pheasant and cabbage. The ingredients will include 1 or 2 pheasants. A 2.5 to 3 pound pheasant will usually feed 2 people. Rough cut onions, rough cut carrots, some kielbasa. Very often sausage is used, but I'm trying to select lower fat items to keep cholesterol and fat down for people who are diet conscious and cholesterol conscious. I also have some blanched cabbage, some bits of turkey bacon, which is also leaner, 95% leaner than regular bacon, and what the French call a sachet bag, which includes a little bit of fresh crushed garlic, bay leaves, whole cloves, and parsley stems. I often wonder if in France, if they call things by American names to make it sound fancier, because we call this a sachet bag. I just call this a spice bag for our purposes because we're in America. What you do is just simply wrap up the spice bag and with a fork pierce the outside so that the flavors of the spices will come through. You don't want to incorporate all of these ingredients sometimes into a dish, so you can easily retrieve this out of a pan or a stew without clouding the stock with the herbs and spices used. We also have some nice ham steaks that I have cut, about 3 of them, going about 6 to 8 ounces each. Some nice chicken broth. You can either buy the chicken broth in a can, or you can boil your own chicken bones and make your own stock. The latter is preferable. I have a little bit of salt and pepper. Very simply, that's all the ingredients that you're going to need to complete this cooking process. Simply, the first step is to take the pheasant on a roasting pan and season it with some salt and pepper lightly on both sides to ensure complete seasoning inside and out. Very lightly seasoned. Place it back together the way that it was. And bake it in your oven for approximately 8 to 10 minutes. That's all that you're going to need for starters. I'll put this right in the oven now. The next stage of the cooking process is to take yourself a roaster. I like to use these cast iron skillets because they're deep, they conduct heat very readily, and also the iron that comes off of the skillet is a good additive and can actually be considered an iron supplement to your diet. And it adds a little bit of flavor to the product also. Line the bottom of the skillet with your ham steaks, like so, and a layer of the cabbage leaves that you have blanched off to the side. Roasting the pheasant at about 325 degrees for 10 minutes, your product should look something like this. Slightly browned, not quite warm inside, but that's about all you need at this point. Next, we're going to take the pheasant and layer it on to the ham and cabbage that we have lined in the bottom of the cast iron skillet. So simply lay it on like this. Take your chicken broth that you have sitting here, approximately a quart or so of chicken broth, and deglaze the pan, rinsing all of the baked on juices of the pheasant, and just pour that back into the chicken broth mixture. Just add a little bit more flavoring to the finished product. You'll see it lift off, and it also helps you when you clean it up. This gets all the stuff that's hard to clean off the pan off. Cleans up so much easier when the pan's warm. Just get as much off as you possibly can, and add that to your chicken broth mixture. Next, you're going to take the vegetables which you have cut up off to the side and add them all around the bird. The onions, the carrots. These are all rough cut because you're going to cook this for about an hour and a half. You don't want these vegetables to be overcooked. Just mix them up nicely around the edge of the bird. Take your seasoning packet and tuck it in between the legs so that the spices can be released as it cooks. Next, you'll add a layer of cabbage on top. By layering this with the cabbage, you prevent moisture evaporation within the bird, thus sealing the bird, giving you a tender product, moist, and very palatable. The smoked ham gives it a real nice flavor too, and it will, for lack of better words, mask the wild flavor of the game. After you have the pheasant covered with the cabbage, take the remainder of the ingredients, the kibasi and bacon, and just layer that on. Now as this cooks, the flavors will filter down through the product and into the broth, and the pheasant will steep in the sauce, and the flavors will all intermingle, and it'll be just an unbelievable flavor. It's just a wonderful dish. Take the remainder of the cabbage leaves and try to cover the entire top of the surface. Like so. And as I mentioned, it will hold the moisture into the bird rather than letting it out. See, a lot of the problem with game is when you've shot it, you've pierced the skin. Once the skin has been pierced, a lot of the juices flow from the bird, which gives you a dry product. That, coupled with it being a very lean product, the fat also keeps the bird tender and moist and whatnot. But by wrapping it and layering it with the cabbage, you've held that moisture into the bird and will give you a more moist, tender product. Your last step is to take the chicken broth, which you have here off to the side, and pour it over top. You want to have it filled almost to the top. So it cooks something like a stew. Finally, you want to seal this so that no moisture can escape, no steam or anything, so that this is all cooked in its own natural juices and there's no moisture escape. So what you'll do is put a piece of parchment paper over the top. If you don't have parchment paper handy, a plastic wrap will work. You may think that it's going to melt in the oven, but once you put the foil over top, it won't melt at all. It'll stay intact, and it'll be virtually airtight so that no moisture can escape. Take your saran wrap and layer it onto the foil like so, and just wrap it. The saran wrap will not melt and will seal the product completely from any kind of moisture loss. That's the name of the game, no pun intended. Keeping the moisture in the bird so that it won't be a dry or wild flavored dish. Now you're going to put this in the oven at approximately 325 degrees for 1.5 hours, or to an internal temperature, if you have a temperature probe, of about 160 to 180 degrees. This will give you a perfectly cooked product. An hour and a half usually every time will suffice, but if you want to be on the safe side and check the temperature, that's the best way. Temperature, there's no it's a fail-proof way of judging the doneness of food. Just pop it right into your oven and cook it for an hour and a half. A couple of considerations that you want to keep in mind with wild game that has been bagged by your spouse or friends is that if it has been shot with buckshot, a lot of times there's BBs that are left into it. Be very careful whenever you're eating this. Chew it slowly. You're going to want to chew it anyhow to savor every flavor of this wonderful dish. Just simply delicious. You're going to love this dish. Each year, that hunting season rolls around, your family and friends will look forward to some of the creative dishes that you'll prepare using the wild game. And using these cooking techniques of moist cooking will also keep the fat and cholesterol content of the dish down so you can stay on your diet. You don't have to add all of this, the lard and pork fat and smoked pork to the dish. One other consideration that you may want to keep in mind is in the processing of your wild game. Most often the the skin is removed from the bird because it's easier to remove the feathers and whatnot. There's a problem and an advantage to this. The problem is that when you remove the skin, you've also removed, for lack of better words, the sheath which holds the moisture into the bird. So by layering it with the cabbage leaves as I've done, you're helping to hold that moisture in. Now, an advantage to that is most of the flavor, the wild flavor that you'll get from game is in the fat of the bird. So if you're able to remove the skin, you might as well take one step further and trim off the little bit of exterior fat that's on there. And this will give you more of a familiar poultry flavor as opposed to a wild game flavor that sometimes people will complain or comment on. After approximately an hour and a half of cooking, remove the pheasant from the oven and it should look something like this. Today we're going to be preparing venison chili. Venison, as you know, is quite lean, so you may need to add a little bit of fat for sautéing and browning the meat. Starting with about 1.5 pounds of ground venison, simply brown it up. And I prefer to use a black skillet for chili because it won't stick as readily to the bottom of the pan. And the flavor of the pan will also enhance the dish. Simply sauté it at high temperature, seasoning throughout the cooking process. I'm going to start seasoning, even as the meat is raw, with about 1 tablespoon of salt, about 3/4 tablespoon of black pepper. Next I'll add about 2 tablespoons of ground cumin, followed by about 1 teaspoon of chili powder and red cayenne pepper. Simply by browning the ground meat with the spices, you develop a different taste combination for the finished product. Many times you've eaten chili where as soon as you bite into the chili, your mouth is on fire. By seasoning early in the cooking process, you distribute the spices more thoroughly. So you may eat, and a few minutes later, you may notice your mouth is burning or your nose is even running. But I firmly believe that seasoning throughout the cooking process is the best way for cooking any kind of chili or stew, sauces, anything on that line. When you're using ground meat, many times when you're finished, you'll see a lot of fat that is floating around with the ground beef. You should always drain that because more often than not, that's the cause for heartburn that you may have with chili or spaghetti sauce or anything on that line. Limiting the amount of fat is a key contributor to a well-balanced diet. You're keeping your weight down and your cholesterol count down. Just keeping as much fat out of your diet is the best policy. As you can see, the venison is extremely lean. You shouldn't really have to drain any fat off, but depending on who grinds your venison for you, you may have variations in that. But generally speaking, it's a very lean meat. Once the meat has thoroughly browned and there's no more red left in it, Add your onions first and stir them in, letting them saute for about 3 or 4 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, until they start to become a little bit transparent. The wild flavor of ground venison really contributes to the flavor of the chili. I play off of it rather than trying to bury the flavor of the venison. I would prefer that it be that it would come through in the finished product. So I guess it's a combination of the seasonings and the preparation that will allow you to do this. Just keep in mind that the grains and the foods that the deer eat is what gives it its unique flavor. And a lot of the original dishes, which chili's been around since is age old, has come from using ground venison. So try to capitalize on that whenever your spouse brings home a deer during hunting season, that you can actually look forward to this time of year to making things like this chili con carne, using venison meat to enhance the flavor. Next I'm going to add the green pepper, and at the same time I'm going to add about a tablespoon of garlic, crushed fresh garlic. I prefer to use all fresh ingredients in my cooking because that will also contribute to the finished product, the success of a finished product. You don't need to saute the green peppers very, very long because they're going to be steeping in liquid very shortly. Next I'm going to add 12 ounces of tomato puree, 12 ounces of tomato sauce, 12 ounces of sliced stewed tomatoes, and 12 ounces of kidney beans. Most of the cooking process of chili is done during the simmering stage of the cooking. It assembles very quickly. Once you have it all put together, you just let it simmer. You can do this in a crock pot in the morning and let it simmer for the entire day so that you have a nice dinner to come home to at the end of the night. Basically, it cooks itself. Personally, I don't think any chili is chili until you've added a little bit of beer. I put about 8 ounces, 1 cup of beer into the chili. It may seem a little loose or soupy at first, but once it cooks down, it'll be nice and rich like you're used to. We're going to let this simmer for approximately 30 minutes to get a very respectable chili, but like Grandma says, simmering it is always better. Let it go for the whole day if possible. Very, very, very low temperature. Crock pot is ideal, as I mentioned. I'm going to add a little bit of probably 4 ounces of chopped turkey bacon. If you're using a game product, you should capitalize on the fact that it's very lean, very low in fat and cholesterol. So if I would have added regular bacon to this chili, it would have been adding that much more fat to the product. Capitalize on the fact that it is very lean. Next I'm going to add about 3 ounces of red hot sauce. That'll warm you up on a cold winter day. And surprisingly enough, a little Grey Poupon mustard, about a tablespoon, and some ketchup. I've been adding that to my chili since I was a young boy, and every time I make it without adding the ketchup and mustard, I miss it. It really adds a little zest to the finished product. Once you have everything combined into the chili, just simply reduce the heat very, very low. And let it simmer for, as I said, at least 30 minutes. Enhancing the finished product, the chili, you could do this a lot of different ways. I have some shredded American cheese or cheddar cheese that you could simply sprinkle on top. About 8 ounces is about all you'll need. Sprinkle that on top and let it melt. And putting it right onto the dinner table, it's just going to knock your family's socks off. Sprinkle little green onions on top. You could also use Monterey Jack cheese or shredded mozzarella cheese, any of the white cheeses. They all work real well on the venison chili. But you put that on your family's dinner table, and I'm sure you're going to get a round of applause for that one. Venison can be a very delicious meal and very lean, very low in cholesterol, very low in fat. Something like chili is perfect for all that ground venison that your husband brings home after he's bagged one. The list of ingredients to complete this venison chili includes ground red pepper, chili powder, about a tablespoon of ketchup, about a tablespoon of mustard, 8 ounces of beer, about a tablespoon of black ground pepper, about a tablespoon of salt, about 3 ounces of red hot sauce, and about 3 tablespoons of ground cumin. 1 12-ounce can of sliced stewed tomatoes, 1 12-ounce can of tomato puree, 1 12-ounce can of sliced stewed tomatoes. Utilizing all that ground venison in creative ways is a challenge. Presenting your family with this fine dish of chili will surely get you a round of applause. Your spouse will look forward to bagging one next year. Today we're going to be preparing a farmer's Sicilian venison steak. This is probably one of my favorite recipes of all time, and it's so easy to prepare. Simply have yourself a black pan ready and smoking hot, very hot, in order to sear the steak when you put it into the skillet. Just a very tiny bit of margarine is all that you'll need in the bottom of the pan, and simply drop the steak in. You're going to brown this approximately 2 minutes per side of the steak. Lightly season with salt and pepper. And I say lightly seasoned because of the ingredients that I'm going to be adding later on in the recipe. Once the steak has browned nicely on each side, you're simply going to put the steak onto a roasting pan. And top it with the Sicilian breadcrumbs. These breadcrumbs consist of some Italian herbs and seasonings, including oregano, basil, salt, black pepper, garlic, parsley, Parmesan cheese, and a tiny bit of corn oil so that they can brown. You don't need to pat the crumbs onto the top of the steak because this will cause the blood to seep into the crumbs. You want these to be approximately a 1/4 inch on top of the steak, completely covering the top of the steak. and simply put it into the oven for 10 minutes. It's as simple as that. There's many accompaniments that you could include with the Sicilian steak. Potatoes is probably one of the prerequisites. Doing potatoes in a creative way is always a challenge to the cook in the house. One way that I've seen potatoes done that was real interesting and people have given brave reviews about is the mushroom potato. Simply by taking a red bliss potato and inserting an instrument, I've decided to use a whip that I took the end of it out. Just simply insert it into the potato like that, maybe about halfway, right about into here. Take a knife and cut around the edge of the potato to take the bottom off. Simply pull the whole thing out like this and remove the part that you've cut, and you have a mushroom potato. You can do this several different ways. You can leave the potato whole like this and boil it. You could cut it in half, boil it, and bake it and brown it, which is real nice. I call these Buckeye fries, for lack of better words, because it's like a Buckeye, Pennsylvania Buckeye. Once you brown it off, it could be a nice accompaniment also. You could also take the mushrooms and insert it into the Buckeye fry and stand it up on your plate. Real nice, real interesting presentations, as you'll see on the finished product. The vegetable, it's a wide range of vegetable. I've decided to serve this Farmer Sicilian steak with stir-fry vegetables. It'll be a nice color presentation and balance on the platter. And with the mushroom potatoes, it's sure to spawn a conversation or two, an interesting conversation. Anything to highlight the meal will be that much better. Very simply, basically brown the venison steak approximately 2 minutes on each side. After you've accomplished that, lay it out onto a baking pan, topping it with the seasoned breadcrumbs that I described earlier. Baking it for approximately 10 minutes at 350 degrees, you should see the crowns of the crumbs beginning to brown real nicely. At that point, you're at probably medium to medium well in cooking of the steak. Simply laying the steak in the center of the platter and arranging the vegetables and potatoes around it, you can come up with some very interesting, very eye-appealing presentations, as you can see here. I've simply taken a couple of green onion daisies and set them off to the side. I have the mushroom potatoes. I used the Buckeye fries and put parsley in it to hold it up. A couple slices of oranges. Real nice presentation, and you're going to be the hit of the party if you bring this with you. And surprisingly enough, I bet you people won't even know that it's venison steak by the way that the ingredients and the crumbs enhance the flavor.